Karen thought she'd finally gotten the best of me, cutting my internet cable. But she had no idea. I'm a cybersecurity expert, and this was just the beginning of the digital war she had unwittingly declared. As her smug smile faded, she realized the true extent of her mistake. This was her last prank. Now it was my turn. That'll teach him, Karen muttered, tossing the severed cable aside with a satisfied grin. No more streaming movies or gaming for you, David. I watched from the kitchen window as my nosy neighbor strutted back to her house, thrilled with her sabotage. Little did she know, this was about to be the biggest mistake of her life. I immediately powered up my laptop and opened my network monitoring software. Sure enough, the connection was down. But I wasn't worried. I had a backup plan. Flipping open a hidden compartment in my desk, I retrieved a small, unassuming device. This wasn't just any router. It was a highly modified, military-grade unit capable of breaching even the most secure networks. Time to teach Karen a lesson, I said, plugging it in. Within minutes, I had hacked into her home network. Her outdated router security was no match for my skills. I scanned her connected devices, looking for vulnerabilities. "Ah, there you are," I muttered, spotting her smart home hub. This was the key to unlocking total control. I swiftly exploited a known security flaw, gaining full administrative access. Now I could see everything happening in her house, from security cameras to appliance data. I even had the ability to remotely control her lights, thermostat, and other connected devices. This is going to be fun, I chuckled, cracking my knuckles. As the sun set, Karen settled in for the evening, unaware of the digital trap I had laid. Little did she know, I was about to unleash a series of increasingly distressing technical difficulties that would leave her bewildered and terrified. First, I remotely disabled her smart TV. Just as she was about to turn it on, the screen remained stubbornly black. Confused, she tapped the buttons on the remote, to no avail. "What the?" she exclaimed, jumping up to check the wiring. But everything appeared to be in order. While she was distracted, I took the opportunity to turn her living room lights on and off rapidly, like a strobe effect. Karen whirled around, eyes wide with panic. "Is this house haunted or something?" she cried, rushing to the light switch. But no matter how many times she flipped it, the lights continued their eerie, flashing pattern. I couldn't help but chuckle as I watched her growing alarm through the camera feed. This was only the beginning. Thoroughly spooked, Karen fled to the kitchen, her eyes darting around nervously. That's when I decided to really ramp up the chaos. With a few keystrokes, I triggered her smart coffee maker to brew a fresh pot, despite the fact that it was nowhere near her usual brew time. The sudden rumble and hiss made her jump in fright. "What is happening?" she shouted, turning this way and that as the coffee machine whirred to life. I watched intently, stifling a laugh as she unplugged the appliance, only for it to turn back on a moment later. The confusion and growing panic on her face was delicious. Next, I targeted her smart oven, preheating it to 450 degrees without her knowledge. As the temperature climbed, a loud beep echoed through the house, signaling that the oven was ready. Karen froze, the color draining from her face. "No, no, no," she muttered, hurrying to the oven. She yanked open the door, only to be met with a blast of scorching heat. Stumbling backward, she shook her head in disbelief. "This can't be real," she breathed, eyes darting around the kitchen. Unable to contain my glee, I decided to really drive the point home. With a few more taps on my laptop, I triggered her smart thermostat, rapidly lowering the temperature in the house. Within minutes, the once cozy living room became an icebox. Karen hugged herself, teeth chattering. "Told you what is going on," she stammered, her panic escalating. I watched silently as she scurried from room to room, desperately trying to regain control of her smart home. But no matter what she did, the eerie malfunctions continued, leaving her more unnerved with each passing minute. As the temperature plummeted and the lights continued their disturbing flashing, I knew it was time to really drive the point home. With a few clicks, I disabled her front door locks, leaving them vulnerable to remote access. This was going to be the coup vigorous, the moment when Karen finally realized the full extent of her mistake. The digital war had only just begun. As the temperature in Karen's house continued to plummet, she huddled on the couch, shivering uncontrollably. The eerie flickering lights and malfunctioning appliances had her on the verge of a complete meltdown. "This can't be happening," she muttered, teeth chattering. "It has to be a dream, or a prank, or—" Suddenly, a loud beep echoed from the front door, making her jump. She whirled around, eyes wide with terror, as the lock slid open with a soft click. "No, no, no," Karen cried, leaping up and rushing to the door. But no matter how much she tugged and twisted the handle, it remained stubbornly unlocked. I watched her growing panic through the security camera feed, a wicked grin spreading across my face. "That's right, Karen," I murmured. "Time to face the consequences of your actions." Convinced that an intruder was about to burst through the door, Karen frantically searched for a weapon, finally settling on a baseball bat she kept by the front hall. Gripping it tightly, she inched toward the door, every muscle tensed for a fight. I'm warning you," she shouted, her voice quivering. "I'm armed, and I'm not afraid to use this." But there was no response, save for the eerie silence that had fallen over the house. The only sound was the faint whirring of the smart home devices, still malfunctioning under my control. Gathering what little courage she had left, Karen slowly pulled the door open, peering out into the dark night. To her surprise, the street was empty, with no sign of an intruder. Confused and relieved, she stepped outside, bat still clutched in her trembling hands. That's when I struck. With a few keystrokes, I remotely locked the door behind her, trapping her outside in the freezing cold. Karen spun around, her eyes wide with horror as she realized her predicament. "No, no, no," she screamed, hammering on the door. "Let me back in. This isn't funny anymore." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. I had complete control now, and I was just getting started. As the temperature continued to drop, Karen huddled on her front step, arms wrapped around herself in a desperate attempt to stay warm. Her breath puffed out in visible clouds, and she could feel the chill seeping into her bones. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking. "Someone help me." But no one was coming. She was alone, at the mercy of an unseen force that seemed to know her every move. And I had no intention of letting her off the hook anytime soon. As the temperature outside continued to plummet, Karen huddled on her front step, shivering uncontrollably. Her fingers were numb, and she could feel the cold seeping into her bones. Please," she stammered, teeth chattering. Someone help me." But her desperate pleas fell on deaf ears. I watched her through the security camera, a wicked grin spreading across my face. This was just the beginning of the digital reckoning she had unwittingly brought upon herself. Determined to heighten her terror, I decided to amplify the disturbing technical malfunctions inside her home. With a few keystrokes, I triggered her smart smoke detectors, filling the air with a shrill, piercing alarm. Karen jumped at the sudden noise, eyes darting back to the locked door. "No, no, no," she cried, pounding frantically on the wood. "Let me in. There's a fire." But no matter how much she begged and pleaded, the door remained firmly shut. I had complete control, and I was only just getting started. Sensing her growing desperation, I took things a step further. Accessing her smart home hub, I remotely activated her security system, causing the motion sensor lights to flicker ominously. "Do what's happening," Karen whimpered, clutching the baseball bat as she backed away from the door. Her wide, terrified eyes scanned the darkness, searching for any sign of an intruder. Little did she know, the only threat she faced was the invisible one that I had orchestrated. With a few more taps on my keyboard, I unlocked the front door, allowing it to swing open with a creak. Karen froze, her grip on the bat tightening. Hello, she called out, voice shaking. Is someone there? When there was no response, she steeled her nerves and cautiously stepped inside, baseball bat raised in a defensive stance. The moment she crossed the threshold, I slammed the door shut behind her, locking her inside once more. No, she screamed, whirling around and yanking at the handle. But it was no use. The door was firmly secured, trapping her in the eerie, malfunctioning house. As the smoke detectors continued their shrill wail and the security lights flickered ominously, Karen sank to the floor, trembling uncontrollably. The realization of her predicament had finally set in, and the true extent of her mistake was becoming painfully clear. This was only the beginning. I had no intention of letting her off the hook anytime soon. Trapped inside her own home, Karen huddled on the floor, clutching the baseball bat as the eerie malfunctions continued around her. The shrill wail of the smoke detectors echoed through the house, and the security lights flickered ominously, casting everything in an unsettling glow. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice quivering. "It has to be a dream or some kind of sick prank." But as the minutes ticked by and the strange occurrences showed no signs of stopping, the realization of her predicament began to sink in. Whoever was behind this had complete control, and they weren't going to let her off the hook anytime soon. Summoning what little courage she had left, Karen slowly rose to her feet, bat still gripped tightly in her trembling hands. She hesitantly made her way toward the kitchen, eyes darting around the shadowy rooms. Hello, she called out, wincing at the way her voice echoed. "Is someone there?" There was no response, save for the eerie hum of the malfunctioning appliances. The coffee maker had begun to brew again, and the oven was beeping insistently, as if demanding to be used. Shaking her head in disbelief, Karen backed away, her gaze trained on the darkened hallway. That's when she noticed the faint glow of her smart home hub, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. "What the?" she breathed, cautiously approaching the device. As she drew closer, she could see the lights blinking erratically, as if possessed by some unseen force. Mustering her courage, Karen reached out a trembling hand and tapped the screen. Immediately, the lights flickered, and the device let out a series of ominous beeps. "No, no, no," she muttered, frantically tapping the screen, trying to regain control. But it was no use. The hub had been completely hijacked, and she was powerless to stop it. Panicked, Karen whirled around, searching for a way to escape the nightmare she had found herself in. That's when she noticed the front door, still cracked open from when she had entered. Without hesitation, she rushed toward it, bat raised high. But the moment she reached for the handle, the door slammed shut with a resounding thud, locking her inside once more. Karen stumbled backward, eyes wide with terror, as the realization dawned on her. She was trapped, at the mercy of an unseen force that seemed to know her every move, and the digital torment was only just beginning. Trapped inside her own home, Karen's panic reached a fever pitch. The incessant wailing of the smoke detectors, the flickering security lights, and the relentless malfunctions of her smart home devices had her on the verge of a complete breakdown. "This can't be happening," she whispered, clutching the baseball bat as she backed away from the front door. "It has to be a dream or some kind of sick prank." But as the seconds ticked by and the eerie occurrences showed no signs of stopping, the harsh reality of her situation began to sink in. Whoever was behind this had complete control, and they weren't going to let her off the hook anytime soon. Desperate to regain some semblance of normalcy, Karen hurried to the kitchen, yanking open the drawers in search of a phone. But to her horror, every device in the room was either disconnected or completely unresponsive. "No, no, no," she cried, tossing the useless phones aside. "Someone, please, help me." Her pleas echoed through the house, but there was no response, save for the persistent beeping of the malfunctioning appliances. Feeling utterly helpless, Karen sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands as the tears finally began to flow. Suddenly, a faint click caught her attention, and she looked up to see the refrigerator door swinging open on its own. Frozen in fear, she watched as the light inside flickered and the shelves began to rearrange themselves, as if guided by an unseen hand. "What is happening?" she whispered, eyes wide with terror. The refrigerator continued its eerie dance, the shelves shifting and the contents rearranging themselves in a seemingly random pattern. Overwhelmed by the sheer impossibility of it all, Karen scrambled to her feet, bat raised in a desperate attempt to defend herself. But as she inched closer, the refrigerator door slammed shut with a resounding thud, locking her out. Startled, she jumped back, heart pounding in her chest. That's when she noticed the lights in the kitchen begin to flicker and pulse, as if in time with the malfunctioning smart home hub in the hallway. Realizing she was completely surrounded by the unseen force that had taken control of her home, Karen let out a desperate scream, swinging the bat wildly at the nearest light fixture. The bulb shattered, plunging the kitchen into darkness, but the flickering continued unabated. Trembling, Karen backed away, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She was trapped, helpless against the relentless technological onslaught that had consumed her house, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. As the malfunctioning smart devices continued their eerie dance around her, Karen huddled in the darkened kitchen, bat gripped tightly in her trembling hands. The persistent wail of the smoke detectors had her nerves frayed, and the flickering lights only served to heighten her growing sense of panic. "This can't be real," she whispered, eyes darting around the shadowy room. "It has to be some kind of nightmare." But the harsh reality of her situation continued to sink in. Whoever was behind this had complete control, and they weren't going to let her off the hook anytime soon. The unseen force that had hijacked her smart home seemed to know her every move, anticipating her every attempt to regain control. Desperate for a way out, Karen slowly rose to her feet, bat held at the ready. She cautiously made her way toward the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. As she approached the glowing smart home hub, she could see the lights blinking in a mesmerizing, almost hypnotic pattern. "Stop it," she muttered, reaching out a trembling hand to tap the screen. But the moment her fingers made contact, the device let out a piercing screech, the lights flashing rapidly in response. Startled, Karen jumped back, nearly losing her grip on the bat. The shrill alarm echoed through the house, mingling with the persistent beeping of the smoke detectors. Panicked, she whirled around, searching for a way to escape the relentless technological onslaught. That's when she noticed the front door, still cracked open from her previous failed attempt at escape. Gripping the bat tightly, she rushed toward it, determined to finally make her way to freedom. But just as her fingers brushed the handle, the door slammed shut with a resounding thud, locking her inside once more. Karen let out a desperate scream, slamming the bat against the wood, but it was no use. The door refused to budge. Defeated, she sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. She was trapped, at the mercy of an unseen force that seemed to anticipate her every move. The digital torment was unrelenting, and she had no idea how to stop it. As the smoke detectors continued their shrill wail and the lights flickered ominously, Karen curled up in a ball, clutching the baseball bat to her chest. She had never felt so helpless, so powerless against the technological onslaught that had consumed her home. And she knew, with a sinking feeling, that this was only the beginning. As the relentless digital torment continued to consume her home, Karen huddled on the floor, clutching the baseball bat to her chest. The shrill wail of the smoke detectors, the flickering lights, and the unresponsive smart devices had her on the verge of a complete breakdown. "Please, someone, help me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. But her desperate pleas fell on deaf ears, echoing through the eerie silence of the malfunctioning house. Suddenly, a faint beeping caught her attention, and she looked up to see the front door lock flashing ominously. Steeling her nerves, She slowly rose to her feet, bat at the ready. The lock clicked, and the door swung open, revealing the dark, empty street beyond. Karen tensed, waiting for the unseen intruder to make their move. But to her surprise, no one entered. Cautiously, she stepped outside, eyes darting around the shadowy neighborhood. The frigid air stung her face, but she barely noticed, her senses hyper-focused on any sign of danger. As she made her way down the driveway, the front door suddenly slammed shut behind her, locking her out. Karen whirled around, heart pounding, only to find the house seemingly abandoned, the eerie malfunctions silenced. "What's going on?" she muttered, staring at the darkened windows. Gathering her courage, she approached the door, trying the handle once more. To her relief, it turned easily, and she pushed it open, stepping back into the foyer. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the now functioning appliances. Karen's eyes widened as she realized that the smart home hub in the hallway was back to its normal, unblinking state. "It's over," she breathed, hardly daring to believe it. Cautiously, she made her way through the house, checking each room. Everything seemed to be back to normal, the earlier malfunctions nowhere to be seen. As she reached the kitchen, a flicker of movement caught her eye. Whirling around, she raised the bat, only to freeze in her tracks. There, sitting calmly at her kitchen table, was her neighbor, David. "Hello, Karen," he said, a smug grin on his face. "Enjoy your little adventure." Karen's mouth fell open, the bat slipping from her numb fingers. You did this?" she stammered, realization dawning. David leaned back in his chair, casually taking a sip of the steaming mug in front of him. "I did warn you not to mess with me," he said, arching an eyebrow. "But you just couldn't resist, could you?" Karen stared at him, the pieces falling into place. All the strange malfunctions, the unearthly control over her smart home devices, it had been him all along. And she had fallen right into his trap. "How," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. David chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm a cybersecurity expert, Karen. Did you really think you could outsmart me?" As the gravity of her mistake sank in, Karen sank to her knees, a mixture of shame, fear, and disbelief washing over her. She had messed with the wrong person, and now she was paying the price. David watched her with a satisfied smirk, taking another sip of his coffee. "This is what happens when you underestimate your neighbors," he said, setting the mug down with a soft click. "I think you've learned your lesson, don't you?" Karen could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. The digital reckoning had come, and she had been the one to bring it upon herself. From this day forward, she knew she would never, ever mess with David again.